Welcome to our webinar. I'm Marshall Shannon. Today we're going to deal with our leadership development process and the topic of how do you preserve your process. Everything we build, and as a church builder, we have to think ahead to a phase that often is left out, and that's facility management. Because you have to live with what you build, you had best prepare the building, design the building, and build it so that it's easy to maintain, cost-effective, and allows you minimum amount of maintenance and repair and replacement. Well, when it comes to designing our ministries and designing and developing our leadership development process, there are things that can break down that need maintenance. And so we want to design on the front end so when you develop it and you're carrying it out, that you understand you're going to have to maintain it, protect it, preserve it. There'll be some things you'll have to repair and replace, and we want you aware of that during the design phase. So today we're going to be giving you 5 different suggestions to help you maintain, improve, and protect your leadership development process. Well, here is the first one. And suggestion number 1 is don't get the cart before the horse. What I mean by that is don't build a car factory but forget to make cars. And so the rule is you can't make leaders if you aren't making disciples. So here's how you keep from getting the cart before the horse. You have to win souls and make disciples before you can develop them into leaders for your ministry. And so disciples are the product of the church, not leaders. When you look back at Matthew 28, the Great Commission, you see that he told us, Christ told the disciples, go make disciples. He did not say go make leaders. But when you look at the life of Christ in his ministry, in his leadership development process, you find that he went to great pains and invested himself in developing the inner 3, their inner core, the 12. And so we know that it's important, and we know in order to carry out our calling as a church, as a ministry, that we've got to develop leaders. But you can't do that if you aren't making disciples. And so not all disciples are leaders, but all leaders are disciples. And so you ought to have a disciple-making process that goes along with or before your leadership development process. So develop processes for producing both disciples and leaders, but keep your priorities right. Don't let your disciple-making process be left unattended while you just focus on your leadership development process. So make certain that you're feeding it. In order to make a car, back to the car factory analogy here, you have, and just down the road from my home, is the BMW plant in Greer, South Carolina, where there are all around the plant suppliers who are creating the different parts to put together the automobile. So the factory is not building those parts, they're buying those parts. And so in doing this, you don't want to try and make leaders without first giving full attention to first winning people to Christ and making disciples. Because your leaders do need to be mature. They do need to be serving in your ministry, and it would probably help if they were good at something in your ministry. Suggestion number 2. Get player placement right. One of the weaknesses regularly a part of churches that we work with is they struggle with player placement. Don't put non-leaders in leadership. It is a common problem that we struggle with doing this, and it's a two-sided coin when we're the leader who is dealing with the process of developing leaders, and we've got to evaluate leaders, that we end up identifying leaders, but also we have to identify non-leaders. You've got to be able to tell who is which. So here are some common misidentifications. They're miscues. We misfire. We fail at player placement when it comes to putting people into positions of leadership. The first one is not all spiritually mature people are leaders. A person can be Christ-like, be growing, have the characteristics of Christ, have the fruit of Spirit, fruit of the Spirit displayed in their life. They're seasoned perhaps and experienced in their walk with the Lord. They may be a good counselor or teacher and any number of other things, but they're not leaders. And you have to be able to distinguish between those two. Here's a second misidentification. Not all committed servants are leaders. You may have people who are working very well and serving in one way or another in your ministry. Just go through your mind, through your education ministry, your worship ministry, perhaps your teaching ministry, and on you go throughout your ministry, and you look at all the people it takes, the volunteers, to run and carry out all the tasks involved in that ministry. But just because they're committed and serving well doesn't mean that they're going to make a good leader for your ministry. If you're familiar with Peter Drucker, he came up with the Peter Principle. And developing the Peter Principle is the thought that you elevate or promote a person in your organization to the next level, one level which ends up being one level above their competency level. And they were doing fine where they were, and they had the bandwidth, both the capability and the capacity to serve in that station well. But you move them up the ladder, and it ends up not being a good fit. It's beyond their bandwidth. There are plenty of servants in your church who might not do well in a leadership position, and you've got to identify them correctly. You don't want to just go reward them for their good service by putting them into leadership when it's not a good fit. Here's the third misidentification, and that is not all competent performers are leaders. Just because a person plays an instrument in your worship service well, or is good at the sound booth, or is good IT in another area, or perhaps is a good writer, or even a good communicator, good teacher, or does okay in your guest services somehow, that they are going to be a leader. So not all competent performers are leaders for your ministry. And so you want to make certain that you identify very clearly, and here are such 3 suggestions to help you with misidentification. Number 1, develop a list of leadership traits. Perhaps take a clue or cue from Rick Warren when he had his Saddleback Sam, and he was Saddleback Sally. But he had those two, and he drew a stick figure of a man and woman, and he put the characteristic traits of what he was trying to develop in disciples, in making a disciple. Well, take and do the same thing for what a leader looks like in your ministry. What are the characteristics? What are the traits? And you go through all of them. And we've given you a pretty good list of things. We put them all into C's for you to identify the traits of a leader. So you develop that list so you don't, when you hold the person up that you're considering for your leadership development process, you hold up the traits you've drawn for your ministry and you check them off and evaluate them. So you need an evaluation system and a developed leadership traits so that you can do something very perhaps painful, and you're going to have to ask the Lord for wisdom and search the scriptures, but you may have to remove non-leaders from leadership. Now, before you balk at that, understand that 2 groups of people are suffering when you have non-leaders in your leadership. One is the other leaders in your church are suffering because you have non-leaders there. And number 2, those followers, those being led by that leader, are suffering. And it probably will cause some real trouble, discouragement. Some will quit. Some will try and go to another ministry. Some will bear and put up with it. But everyone's going to be miserable. You've got to identify and then equip them and prepare them correctly for the task at hand. Now, not all competent performers are leaders. Not all committed servants are leaders. Spiritually mature people can be leaders, but not all of them are leaders. And so you want to keep this in mind, both the traits and how you're going to use those traits, how you're going to identify those traits in a person. So let's move to suggestion number 3, and that is design your leadership development process to include both the generalized and specialized training. What I mean by this is generalized is an overall view of the entire ministry that you have, and specialized is looking at just one of the ministries in it. The problem here is that often leaders have the silo effect, where they've got their ministry and you've got 10 silos developed in your church, and every ministry is looking after its own manpower, its own ministry, its own money, its own future, its own people that are involved in it, the volunteers and those that they are serving. And the problem with that is that they want to focus just on them. So let's use another sports analogy and talk about a football team. You've got offense, defense, and special teams. You've got a coaching staff. When you look at the entire team and the others who support the team, you've got to have all the players both specialized for their area, the special teams, with returning punts and kicking punts, and then you've got offense and defense in their particular work. And if all the players are focused on is their specialized task, and they're not looking at the overall game plan, and they're not a part of everyone being together, and you've got a team, you're going to have problems. So let me try and motivate you to develop both the general understanding of the leadership of your ministry and all the ministries collectively together in your mission and visions and strategic plan, and then specializing in on them doing well in the area where they are assigned to lead. But here's what happens when you put it together. First off, it produces cohesiveness among your team members. You've got them cheering for each other, supporting each other, praying for each other, encouraging each other, helping each other, maybe investing themselves in all kinds of ways in each other, and they're not even in the same specialized ministry in your church. The second thing happens is you've got coordination. They're willing to work together. If your ministry gets of some size and you've got a bunch of different ministries and your facility is being used almost 24/7, 365, they better coordinate together with everything that is going on, because the people and the place and the priorities and the time and everything needs to be coordinated together, or you'll have two people trying to use the same room at the same time, or they don't work together to remove everything they're doing and put it back where it belongs so the next group can set up and use the same space. So that's just one area of coordination together. Or if you've got church buses that you're using or anything else that you're doing, take and break your ministry down. There has to be coordination. But if you don't protect your leadership development process and your leaders working together, they're going to be butting heads. They're going to be fighting among themselves. They're going to go silo on you and only care about their ministry. The second thing you find is collaboration. Not only coordinated together, but working together. They agree to do so. They collaborate together. So you may find that the children's ministry is receiving help from the senior high teen ministry or the college career ministry, and they're working together, and you're finding collaboration between those two ministries where you've got mentoring going on. I mean, just let your imagination run for a moment here, where you've got college age and senior high age helping junior age and middle school kids and helping them adjust and adapt to coming into their new school and moving up through the grade levels, or how to serve the Lord in their area, or how to grow in their faith, or how to deal with difficult schoolmates. And, I mean, all these different things that they can be helping if they'll collaborate together. And then connection. The blessing that comes from them being connected together in a cohesive group that are coordinating together, collaborating together, and they are orchestrated together. You can orchestrate your entire team of leaders together with their individual specialized ministries, but able to make them effective and efficient so that you are stewarding the ministry God has entrusted to you. Design your process that includes both training for generalized and specialized, and you'll reap the benefits of it in your ministry. God will be honored, and it will do you good. Here's suggestion number 4. Build your leadership team. Think for a moment of the people that are just coming into leadership in your ministry. Then you've got those that are existing. And of those existing leaders that have been in your work, you have those that are experienced. They're either been there for a good while and gathered in experience, or they've been in multiple ministries and have experience. And then out of that group, you've got those that are exhausted. So in looking at these 4 different groups of people, that some that need encouragement, some that need equipping, some that need empowering, some that need establishing. You're looking at these people. Think of, let's use another sports analogy. Just down the road from my home was a gym. It's gone now, but that gym was a huge building. Used to be a Best Buy, a big electronics store, and they turned it into a gym. Well, my sons and I joined the gym, and we go in. We were all at different levels and different shapes. And so as the trainers begin to work with us, you'll have all kinds of people in there. You'll have people who come in who've got a health problem, maybe heart disease, and they're working to cardiovascular. You may have another with diabetes, and they're working in another way. Then you've got those who are bean poles, and they have no muscle development, muscle toning, and they're looking to build their body up with their strength. So you've got cardio and muscular. Then you may have those who are built up that are muscular, but they can't go up a flight of stairs without being out of breath. So you've got people trying to put on weight and put on muscles, and others trying to take off weight and develop muscles, those that are working on their endurance with their cardio, and those that are working on their strength of their body, and because they've got a task at hand. And so I remember one young man that my father-in-law taught and coached in college, and he was a long-distance runner. And his goal was to be able just to change a tire. He wasn't strong physically in that way, but he could run a long way and quickly. And so as you look at this, you've got all these different kind of people who are being invited into your leadership development process, and you've got to expand your process to include all of them and to balance the process so that those that need to exercise, those that need to be equipped are equipped, those that need to be educated are educated. And in doing this, that you're able to minister to each of them. Whether you compartmentalize or blend them together to help, that you've got to be able to evaluate where they are in the leadership process, how they're put together, and what they need. And so in looking at this, if you don't have this, your process is going to break down. You need to maintain it, improve it, and preserve it and protect it. Here's suggestion number 5. Stay focused on the right things. So watch your preoccupation with blank. Now, in talking about this, you've got to coordinate and balance your process of your development so that you don't get out of balance. Everything is to have its place and balance together as a whole. Now, I say this because every church is unique, so your process may be balanced and look different than others. But look at the area where you tend to focus on in your leadership and begin to understand that you need to balance it. So I'll give you an area that often is a problem, and that is people are focused on getting the job done. They're focused on the task at hand, but then we fail to train those people for the task, to teach them for the task, to test them and give them time to develop so that they're prepared for the task. We just throw them out there and say, it's your ministry, you lead it. Now, That means you need to equip them, not just focused on them getting the job done. You need to educate them. You need to engage them in. So you put them in, but you've got to work with them when they're engaged in the process. You've got to encourage them. So if all you're focused on is trying to get the work done, and you're task-oriented and you are driven in the way you're put together, you may fail to equip them correctly, educate them correctly, engage them in the task correctly, encourage them, or empower them. You've got to give them the authority and equip them so that they're ready to go. And there are three aspects to the development process of building leaders. There's the nurturing aspect of them spiritually and who they are as a person. There's the equipping aspect where you're equipping them for the task at hand. Then there's the development aspect where you're developing their leadership ability, their whole person. Those three phases have to work together. And so as you look at your development process, is it balanced in the way that will help you accomplish your mission as a church? Is God going to be honored in how you're making disciples and building leaders? You've got to establish them. This takes time for people to see that they're competent and trustworthy, and they become established leaders in your ministry. So be aware of your blind spots, and we all have them. So it means that you may need a consultant to come in, or a coach like myself, and for us to diagnose and analyze and diagnose your leadership development process, so we might spot your blind spots and see areas where it's out of balance for what you're trying to do. Well, these are just 5 suggestions. I'm sure there's others that will perhaps come to your mind as you think of this. So design your leadership development process so that you can maintain it, protect it, preserve it, and improve it in years to come. Think down the road about how you're going to make this happen so that it is designed correctly and developed correctly, so when you deploy your process, you have in mind at least these 5 things that will help you move your ministry forward. Well, I'm Marshall Shannon, your ministry design coach at Ministry Design Training and Ministry Design Concepts. You can reach me at this email address or either one of these 2 phone numbers, and we'll be happy to talk with you, to give you coaching one-on-one off-site or on-site or a mixture of both to help you develop your leadership development process.